Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabric, back with the Easy Piece Table Runner for the month of June. This is the disappearing pinwheel block, and we use the ombre confetti collection from Moda. It's one of my favorite collections, and did you know that Moda has now made that one of their basics? That excites me because sometimes Moda collections come and go very quickly, and I find more and more uses for the ombre confetti collection than probably any other collection I've seen before. We had just so much fun. Did you realize that these 3 blocks are made from one fabric? Isn't that fun? It looks complex and it looks like it's multiple fabrics when in fact it's just one. So of course you'll need to download the project. Shabby Fabric's website. Free downloads is at the very bottom of our homepage. Click that and you will be looking for the Easy Piece Table Runner series for June. We started this with May, so of course go back and grab that one. Each month we'll be teaching you a new block, and then of course there'll be new applique on either end as well. Kits of course are available, and all of the applique portion will be previews and laser cut for you so that you can jump right into the fun of sewing everything down to the backgrounds and get your table runner together. Really, it's kind of a half-day project. Super easy and a lot of fun. We recommend sizing your fabric actually before you start cutting because we will have some bias cuts, and as you probably already know, anything on bias has an extra amount of stretch, which is not usually friendly to a quilter when you're trying to get accurate piecing. When you're trying to go around a curve, maybe like a binding, a curved binding, it's very helpful. But for that reason, anytime we're doing piecing that involves bias, we like to add sizing. It just adds a little more body and stability to the fabric. You would spray that onto your fabric and iron that before you do any cutting. Now once you have everything downloaded, go ahead and put your download aside. I'll talk you through everything. These blocks are put together with 2 11-inch squares. You'll be having one that's white and one that's in your ombre. These two, of course, are from the 2 ends of the ombre confetti. That's what's called a double ombre. It's darkest by the selvage, graduating to lightest in the middle, and then again increasing in intensity to dark at the other selvage. So the first thing that we did once we added our sizing and pressed our fabric is we just cut an 11-inch strip and we removed the selvage. We cut an 11-inch square off of the 2 darkest sides, the 2 closest to the selvage, and put those aside. Then for the middle portion, we went right to the middle to try to find the lightest portion, and we just cut 5.5 inches to either side of that. And that's what will be your center portion. That's your lightest block, and that'll be in the middle of your table runner. You'll cut 3 of your white 11 by 11-inch squares, and then what we recommend that you do is press them together. They're cut separately, but we have noticed that when you're wanting fabrics to really be kind of stuck to, kind of cling to each other, that if you press them together, they're more likely to not shift. So that's just something that Tammy and I have learned along the way, that when you press them together, even though we press them individually, that when they press together, they're more likely just to hold together during our next step. And what that next step is once they're pressed together like this, is to go ahead and pin. We like to pin from the inside versus out here because the pins can stay in place. What we'll be doing is sewing 1/4 inch all the way around all 4 sides. So that's one of the reasons we love to pin on the inside. When I first learned to quilt, I always pinned on the outside, and of course as I sewed, I removed those pins because I've never been comfortable sewing over pins. I know some people do. I have never been comfortable with that. I have inadvertently hit a pin where I pinned too close and broke my needle, broke the pin, and that went inside my machine. And it's just not something I make a habit of doing. So for that reason, we like to pin on the inside. So when we take things to the sewing machine, everything is held together and we're not removing pins and we're not sewing over anything. So you have everything pinned and you sew 1/4 inch around, which I've done ahead of time. So I had already went ahead and sewn around all 4 sides, and now you'll want to take this to a spinning mat. I love a spinning mat. The first thing we'll do once we have that all sewn together, a 1/4 inch seam allowance, is I'm just going to take my ruler. This is my 2.5 inch wide ruler, and I'm just going to go diagonal to diagonal. And I'm going to rotate that so I don't have to move anything. And again, I'll be able to rotate that mat until it's the most natural cutting position for me. I'm not doing any crazy or dangerous cuts. And now I will take these to the pressing mat, and I'm just going to set my seams and press to the dark side. Now we've got the bias going, right? We saw me cut on the diagonal. That's when the bias occurred. So we want to be careful whenever we're dealing with these bias edges. So I like to get these trimmed away because it's extra bulk. The next thing that we'll be creating is a pinwheel, and as you know, whenever you do a pinwheel, there's already enough going on in the intersection of the pinwheel itself that any extra fabric there that's not part of it is not really welcome in that area, and that's why I just, as a matter of habit, remove those little dog ears before I do any kind of piecing. Now you'll be referring to your pattern to lay out your pinwheel. So let's get that back out, and we can see that when we lay out our pinwheel, we have our darkest fabric up top, and we'll lay these out, and we can play with those to see if we want to have those maybe, you know, I'll show you what I mean. Let's lay this out initially. Nope, that one goes like that. Have I sewn pinwheels together wrong? Yes. More than once. I'm afraid I have to say yes to that again. So here's what I'm talking about. See how as I look at my pinwheel, I feel like I have 2 darker ones here and 2 lighter ones here. So I might want to go ahead and change that so that I kind of have opposites. So that's what I'm talking about. With the ombre, each one is going to be a little bit different, and that's what adds excitement. So you can kind of mix that up as you prefer, but no matter what, you need to make sure that the layout has these darkest areas as shown here in our pattern. Once you're satisfied with your layout, you'll just go right sides together and right sides together. Now take note of something here. Notice how you have interlocking seams. By pressing to the dark each time, isn't that great how you have that nested seam right there? And this is where I'm going to make sure that my pin is running right along that seam. We're just going to go down here. I'm going to lift that away. I'm going to go directly beneath that, rock that pin upward right through that seam, right through this seam, and let's add a couple other pins. All right. I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch here, and when I come back, let's see how we did, and we're going to put our pinwheel together. So these are sewn together. Now this is a point of decision. Some people like to press to the side, some people like to press open. This is where I feel like it's your discretion. Sometimes if a fabric, you know what I do is I sometimes just let the fabric kind of tell me what it wants to do. If fabric has a tendency to want to lean one direction or the other, I go with it. If there's an insignificance, or it appears that being open may be best to reduce bulk, then I'll go that way. In this instance, let's go ahead and press this open. As we know, in the center of any pinwheel, there's a lot of bulk. There's a lot of fabric coming together. So for that reason, I usually go ahead and press that open. So let's do that again. We want to be pretty gentle. We have bias happening, like I said. I love this portable iron. It's just so little and cute, and it has a little holds water, so if you want to steam something, it can, but you can also turn that feature off or just not add water to it. I just love that it's so small and portable, and I don't have a cord dragging around. So as you know, or maybe you don't know, maybe you've never made a pinwheel, right sides together. And again, now that I have my seams open, let me show you a little trick that Miss Tammy's taught me, and it's kind of the same that we've done, is rather than kind of just visually kind of hoping I got that right, again, we go right down through that seam that's now split, and I'm going to go right down through that seam, rock my needle, back up through that seam, back up through this seam, pinning is so important. I have learned this the hard way. If I don't pin on things like this, the results are usually not what I was looking for, and I end up seam ripping. So that's where nice quality pins matter. And these patchwork pins from Clover are super sharp, so they don't disturb the fabric. They hold it exactly where you want things to be. I'm going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to come back and press that, and then I'm going to take you into the next thing, and you're going to see how this block comes together in nothing flat. You're going to be amazed. I'll be right back. So I've got my block, my pinwheels all put together and pressed. I pressed that center seam open, and it's now on my spinning mat. Now we're going to trim the block down to 13.5 inches square, 13.5. But it's significant in that you start from of course, the center here vertically as well as horizontally to measure on either side of that, and that measurement will be 6 3/4 inches. So I'm going to find 7 on my ruler and just back off by 1/4 inch. So let's trim here. I'm going to lift my ruler and we'll turn, and again measuring, I'll start with my 7 because I can see that very boldly, and then I see my white line. I'm going to scoot over, so I'm at my 6 3/4. And we'll cut again, and we'll repeat that 2 more times, always starting from our reference point of the center, that seam. And 1 more time. Okay. So now our block is squared up, and I always like to just double check. I'm going to move that over and look. Now this part is absolutely so cool that this works. We know that our block is now 13.5, and if you divide that number by 3, you come up with a measurement of 4.5. You don't have to worry about writing that down. All of that information will be included in your pattern. So you will very carefully, and now I'm going to turn, let's see, I'm going to turn my ruler around because I want my black dots toward me that says 4.5. All I have to do is line up my ruler with my 4.5, and I'm running right along the edge of my block, and I'm going to cut. And I'm not going to take it away, but I'm just moving it a breath that I can see where to line up again for 4.5. And just to be sure, this should measure just about dead on at 4.5. So let's, per our pattern, it's going to have us, I'm just going to kind of squeeze that all back together here, make sure my sight picture is just as it was before I cut everything. We're going to turn this 90 degrees, and we'll repeat our steps. 4.5, 2 cuts of that. And I'm just going to check that last cut. If anything moves, get it right back where it should be. This is the most important part, I would say, of this block, is the actual trimming of it in this step. Okay, everything is right on where it should be. All right, your pattern will guide you through this. These darker portions here, you'll just rotate them per our pattern toward the middle. And again, our pattern is showing you to rotate that dark toward the center. Is that cool? How fun is that? It looks like such a complicated thing that literally started with 2 squares that were 11 inches. I mean, that to me is just incredible, because when I look at this, you could create that block by cutting half square triangles and cutting rectangles and making separate pinwheels, and it would be much more complex to cut and time consuming. So this is so much fun. Now to put the block together, it's like you'd put together any other block that has, you know, individual squares. You'll just sew these, you know, place that right side together, 1/4 inch seam allowance here and here, and you can decide whether you want to press that toward the middle, sew these together, press those in the opposite direction, here, press toward the middle, and then sew the rows together, and that's your block. You'll repeat that for the 3 blocks. You'll sew those together, and then just like we showed you in the first month, you'll move on to your applique portion. And because our applique design also kind of goes on to the sashing, you'll want to have your background, attach your sashing, and attach your ground. We went ahead and pre-assembled our little bumblebee, our bumblebees and our beehive and flowers ahead of time using our applique pressing sheet. And then you'll just, of course, have your pressing mat, put everything down together visually, you know, where you want that to be. I love our applique pressing sheet. It makes putting these things together, and again, if you don't know what I'm talking about, I won't be covering that in each of the videos, because then you've already seen me do that in the May. If you're not familiar with that technique, please go back and watch the Easy Piece Table Runner for May, where I go into great detail of how to take these applique shapes together with the assistance of an applique pressing sheet and a light box, and you can pre-assemble the applique as one unit, and so that way you'll be placing that onto the background, ironing it down, and stitching around as you prefer. So that's all there is to making this really fun disappearing pinwheel block. I hope you are enjoying the series. We love hearing from you, and I'll see you next month for the Easy Piece Table Runner for July.